He has no idea that the judge who is about to send him to prison was one of his 4 daughters he had rejected 30 years ago. He didn't recognize her face. He didn't know the hands that would write his prison judgment were the same tiny fingers that once reached for him as a newborn baby. But how did this old man end up in the courtroom, and why is his own daughter about to send him to prison? Join me as we find out in this emotional African folktale, packed with twists, real-life lessons, and a powerful ending. In the bustling town of Okpala, eastern Nigeria, everyone knew Emeka Okafor. He wasn't wealthy, but he was respected. His hands could craft the finest furniture, sturdy beds, elegant wardrobes, and roofing frames that could withstand the fiercest Harmattan winds. When Emeka married Grace, people called her the luckiest woman in Okpala. She was gentle, respectful, and carried herself with quiet dignity. Everyone believed she would bring peace and prosperity to his household. But peace didn't come as expected. In their first 3 years of marriage, Grace got pregnant twice. Both pregnancies ended in heartbreaking miscarriages. The first happened in the 3rd month, a quiet loss that left them both devastated. The second was worse. Grace nearly bled to death and spent weeks unable to walk properly. After the second miscarriage, Emeka's mother, Mama Ajora, began looking at Grace differently. Her voice grew sharper whenever the young woman was around. "Some women carry bad luck with them," Mama Ajora would say loudly enough for Grace to hear. Before she came, everything was going well in this house. At first, Emeka defended his wife. "It's not her fault, Mama," he would insist, but as months passed with whispers growing louder in the compound, even he began to change. He stopped holding her at night. He avoided her eyes. The pressure for a child, especially a son, began eating at his soul. Grace felt the distance like a cold wind. She prayed every night, begging God not just for a child, but to stop feeling like a stranger in her own home. In their 4th year of marriage, Grace conceived again. This time she told no one until the 5th month. Only Emeka knew. Fear had taught her caution. She moved carefully, avoided stress, and followed every piece of medical advice she could afford. By the 7th month, her belly was extraordinarily large. The village nurse, Mama Nkeche, was puzzled when she examined her. "This is very unusual," she said, feeling around carefully. "Maybe twins or more." When the 9th month arrived, Grace went into labor just before dawn. Her screams woke the entire compound. The delivery was long and excruciating, hours of agony that left everyone anxious. Then came the news that would change everything. "The first girl is here," Mama Nkeche announced as a strong cry filled the room. "Girl," Emeka's voice carried immediate disappointment. "Wait, there's another." Minutes later, a second baby girl arrived, smaller but healthy. "2 girls," Emeka muttered, pacing outside like a caged animal. "Wait, a third is coming," Mama Nkeche called out, working frantically. After more intense labor, the 3rd baby girl emerged, tiny but breathing strongly. "3 girls," Emeka said flatly, his face dark with anger. "Wait," Mama Nkeche suddenly called out urgently, "there's one more." The room fell silent, except for Grace's exhausted breathing. After what felt like eternity, the 4th baby girl emerged, the smallest of all, but with the loudest cry. Mama Nkeche stepped outside, wiping sweat from her brow, her face filled with wonder. "Emeka, this is extraordinary. 4 healthy daughters, quadruplets. This is a miracle from God." The midwife said such births bring special blessings to the father. Emeka's face turned to stone. "All 4 are girls." "Yes, 4 beautiful girls. This is incredibly rare. You are truly blessed. The elders say quadruplet daughters will bring their father great honor." Emeka turned and walked away without another word. Inside the room, Grace held her babies close, tears of joy and exhaustion streaming down her face. She didn't care that they were all girls. After everything she'd endured, they were alive. They were perfect. But when Mama Ajora entered the room, she didn't even glance at the babies. "4 girls," she said with disgust, standing at the doorway. "After all these years of waiting, this is what you give us. 4 mouths to feed and no son to carry the family name. You have cursed this house." That night, Emeka entered the room where Grace lay with the newborns. His eyes were cold, his face set like granite. "You cannot stay here," he said without preamble. Grace thought she'd misheard. "What? You cannot stay here. I cannot waste my life on this curse. You've given me nothing but shame, 2 miscarriages, then 4 girls. 4, I have nothing to show for all these years." "Emeka," she whispered, her voice shaking, "they are our children." The midwife said quadruplets are a special blessing. "Blessing?" He laughed bitterly. 4 girls with no father's inheritance, 4 dowries I'll have to pay, 4 burdens that will drain every kobo I earn. This is not a blessing, this is a curse. They are innocent babies, she pleaded. They didn't choose to be born girls. He pointed to the door. Take them and leave. You can stay a few days to recover, but I don't want to see you in my house after 1 week. I don't care where you go. She begged, she cried, she pleaded, but his heart had turned to stone. 3 days later, unable to bear the coldness and whispers, Grace made her decision. No one helped her pack. She wrapped each baby in the few pieces of cloth she had. A kind neighbor gave her a large bag for her belongings. Her feet were still swollen from the difficult birth, but she walked anyway. As she left through the compound gate, carrying 2 babies and leading a small cart with the other 2, she didn't look back. Behind her, Emeka sat alone in his house, while his mother cooked him yam and palm oil. You did the right thing, Mama Ajora said. Now maybe your fortune will return. He nodded, but something deep inside felt hollow, like something precious had been torn away forever. The journey to Owerri was the longest walk of Grace's life. Carrying 4 newborns with her few possessions, she moved slowly, stopping frequently to feed them and rest. When she reached the outskirts of Owerri, a provision store owner named Mama Nene took pity on her. Seeing the 4 babies, the woman's eyes filled with tears. 4 babies, and you're alone? Mama Nene asked in amazement. Quadruplets, Grace confirmed quietly. That night, Grace slept in the corridor of the local health center. The security guard, moved by her situation, allowed her to stay. She laid the babies on the floor, padded with her wrappers, and sat watching over them. The next morning she named them Kioma, Chidima, Chimaka, and Chinasa. Word spread like wildfire through Owerri about the woman with quadruplets. People came to see the miracle babies. Some brought gifts, old clothes, expired milk powder, leftover bread. After 2 weeks, the widow Mama Nene approached her. I have a small room behind my house, she offered. You can stay there until you find your feet. That cramped room with no windows became the foundation of their new life. Grace did whatever work she could find, washing clothes, fetching water, roasting groundnuts to sell by the roadside. The money was barely enough for 4 babies, but every kobo went to her daughters. She often starved herself so they wouldn't go hungry. As the girls grew, their personalities emerged distinctly. Kioma was bold and mechanical-minded, always taking apart toys to see how they worked. Chidima was quiet but observant, fascinated by how people felt and why they acted certain ways. Chimaka was energetic and argumentative, always asking why and who says so. Chinasa was the most serious, always organizing her sisters and settling their disputes with remarkable wisdom. Despite their poverty, Grace was determined her daughters would have education. At age 5, she enrolled them in a public school. They shared 2 uniforms between the 4 and walked to school together every morning. By age 8, Grace had started frying akara by the roadside. Her akara became popular, and with the profits, she bought a small mattress for the girls and a few books. She never spoke badly about their father. Instead, she taught them, work hard, make something of yourselves, nobody owes you anything, never let anyone treat you like you're worthless. Meanwhile, back in Okpala, Emeka had remarried. His second wife, Gloria, was a teacher. When she got pregnant, Emeka was overjoyed. Finally, his real destiny had arrived. But when the child was born, a boy they named Obina, he was sickly from birth. Constant hospital visits and medical bills began draining Emeka's resources. The boy he'd waited for was becoming a burden greater than 4 healthy daughters ever could have been. By age 13, the 4 girls were no longer known as the quadruplets in Owerri. They were known by their names, and each name carried weight. Kioma had developed a talent for fixing mechanical things. She could repair radios, fans, and even small engines. People brought their broken appliances to the small engineer. Chidima excelled in sciences and medicine. She volunteered at the local clinic, asking nurses complex questions and declaring confidently, I want to become a doctor. Chimaka was brilliant in mathematics and economics. She could calculate market prices, understand business trends, and even helped local traders optimize their profits. But it was Chinasa who surprised everyone the most. She was fascinated by justice, fairness, and law. She would settle disputes among her schoolmates with such wisdom that teachers started calling her our little lawyer. She read every newspaper she could find, especially court cases and legal proceedings. And their headmaster recommended them for a scholarship exam sponsored by a Lagos-based NGO. All 4 passed with exceptional scores. The NGO was so impressed by quadruplets excelling together that they offered full sponsorship through university. Years passed like chapters in an epic novel. The four girls soared through secondary school and university, each excelling in her chosen field. Chidima graduated medical school with honors and became Dr. Chidima Okafor, posted to a prestigious hospital in Enugu. Chioma earned first-class honors in mechanical engineering and landed a job with an international construction company in Abuja. Chiamaka studied economics and business, becoming a successful financial consultant working with multinational corporations in Lagos. But it was Chinasa who achieved something truly extraordinary. She studied law with such brilliance that she graduated as the best student in her class. After years of practice, she was appointed as a high court judge in Enugu State, one of the youngest ever appointed. The four sisters sent money home monthly, building their mother a beautiful house with modern amenities. Grace no longer lived in poverty. She wore fine clothes and spoke with quiet pride about her 4 stars. Meanwhile, Emeka's life was crumbling. His son Obina died at age 12 from complications. His second wife left him. He lost his house and possessions, eventually becoming homeless and surviving on odd jobs and charity. Years of poor decisions, alcoholism, and desperation had reduced Emeka to a shadow of his former self. He lived in an abandoned building on the outskirts of Okpala, surviving on handouts and occasional carpentry work. One evening, desperate and drunk, Emeka broke into a small shop to steal food and money. The owner, an elderly woman, caught him in the act. In his panic to escape, he pushed her, and she fell, hitting her head on the concrete floor. The woman didn't die, but she was seriously injured and hospitalized. Neighbors who witnessed Emeka fleeing identified him to the police. Within hours, he was arrested and charged with aggravated burglary and assault causing grievous bodily harm. The case was serious enough to be tried in the High Court. Emeka sat in the prison cell, thinking about how far he'd fallen, from respected carpenter to criminal defendant. He had no money for a good lawyer, no family to support him. His court-appointed lawyer was overworked and barely interested in his case. "The judge for your case is Justice Chinasa Okafor," his lawyer mentioned during their brief meeting. "She's known to be tough but fair, very young for a high court judge. You better hope she's in a good mood." Emeka nodded absently. The name meant nothing to him. The courtroom in Enugu High Court was packed. Word had spread about the case, a former carpenter accused of seriously injuring an elderly woman during a robbery. The victim's family filled one side of the courtroom, demanding justice. Emeka sat in the dock, wearing the only clean clothes his lawyer could find for him. He looked older than his years, broken by life's disappointments. "All rise for the Honorable Justice Chinasa Okafor," the court clerk announced. Everyone stood as the judge entered. She was a young woman, probably in her early 30s, wearing the traditional black robe and white wig. She carried herself with dignity and authority that commanded respect. Emeka glanced up briefly as she took her seat, then looked down again. He was too consumed with his own misery to pay attention to the judge's face. Justice Chinasa Okafor looked down at the case file, then at the defendant. For a moment, her professional composure flickered. 30 years had passed, but she recognized something familiar in the man's features, the shape of his nose, the set of his shoulders. Could it be? She glanced at the case file again. Emeka Okafor, age 62, from Okpala. Her heart began racing, but her face remained composed. Years of legal training had taught her to control her emotions. "Case number HC 234-2023, she announced. "The state versus Emeka Okafor. Charges of aggravated burglary and assault occasioning grievous bodily harm. How does the defendant plead?" Emeka's lawyer stood. "Not guilty, your lordship." As the proceedings began, Justice Chinasa listened to the evidence with growing inner turmoil. This broken man in the dock, could he really be the father who had thrown her and her sisters away as babies? During the lunch recess, Justice Chinasa retreated to her chambers and made a phone call. "Mommy, I need to ask you something urgent," she said to Grace. "Our father's full name was Emeka Okafor from Okpala, right?" "Yes," Grace replied, puzzled. "Why are you asking?" "There's a man in my court today. Same name, same place. Could it be him?" There was silence on the line. "Describe him," Grace said finally. Chinasa described the defendant, his approximate age, his features, his broken appearance. "It could be him," Grace said quietly. "What kind of case?" "Criminal case, robbery and assault. Mommy, if this is him, what do I do?" "You do your job," Grace said firmly. You are a judge first, his daughter second. Justice must be served, regardless of who stands before you. When court resumed, Justice Chainasa studied the defendant more carefully. The more she observed, the more certain she became. This was the man who had rejected her and her sisters as bad luck. The irony was overwhelming. The very daughter he had cast away now held his fate in her hands. The evidence against Emeka was overwhelming. Multiple witnesses had identified him. His fingerprints were found in the shop. The victim's injuries were severe, requiring extensive medical treatment. During sentencing submissions, Emeka's lawyer made a desperate plea for mercy, describing his client's fall from respected craftsman to desperate criminal. Your lordship, my client is a broken man who made a terrible mistake in a moment of desperation. He has lost everything, his family, his livelihood, his dignity. Sending him to prison for many years would serve no purpose except to destroy what little remains of his life. The prosecutor argued for the maximum sentence. Your lordship, this was a violent crime against a vulnerable elderly woman. The defendant showed no remorse and must face the full weight of the law. Justice Chainasa listened to both sides, her mind wrestling with competing emotions. Legally, the case was clear. Emeka was guilty and deserved punishment, but personally, she was facing the man who had shaped her life in ways he could never imagine. Finally, she was ready to deliver judgment. Will the defendant please stand? She commanded. Emeka rose slowly, his legs shaking. He looked up at the judge for the first time, expecting to see condemnation in her eyes. Instead, for just a moment, he saw something that made his heart stop. Those eyes, they looked familiar, but where had he seen them before? Emeka Okafor, Justice Chainasa began, her voice steady and clear. You have been found guilty of aggravated burglary and assault occasioning grievous bodily harm. Before I pass sentence, I want you to know something. She paused, letting the words sink in. 30 years ago, you rejected 4 baby girls as bad luck. You called them a curse and threw them out of your house with their mother. Emeka's face went white, his legs nearly gave out. One of those 4 girls is standing before you now, in the black robe of justice. I am Justice Chainasa Okafor, your daughter. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Emeka collapsed into his chair, covering his face with his hands as the truth hit him like lightning. You thought 4 daughters would bring you shame, she continued, her voice unwavering. Instead, they brought honor you could never imagine. One became a doctor, one an engineer, one a financial expert, and one, the judge who now holds your fate. The courtroom was completely silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. However, Justice Chainasa continued, I am not here as your daughter. I am here as a representative of justice. My personal feelings cannot interfere with the law. She looked down at her notes, then back at the defendant. Emeka Okafor, you are hereby sentenced to 5 years imprisonment with hard labor. However, considering your age, poor health, and the fact that the victim has recovered fully, I am suspending 3 years of this sentence on condition of good behavior. She banged her gavel. You will serve 2 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community service. During your community service, you will work with disadvantaged families, helping to build homes for those who have none, so you might understand the value of family you once threw away. As the court officers led him away, Emeka looked back at his daughter one final time. She sat there in her judge's robes, the very image of the justice and dignity he had failed to recognize in her as a baby. Your lordship, he called out, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Justice Chainasa looked at him for a long moment. Apologies cannot undo the past, Mr. Okafor, but perhaps your remaining years can be spent understanding what you lost. 2 years later, when Emeka was released from prison, he began his community service. Every day, he helped build homes for poor families, many of them headed by single mothers struggling to raise their children alone. Justice Chainasa never visited him in prison, nor did she seek him out after his release, but through mutual contacts, she learned that he had changed. His community service reports showed a man who worked tirelessly and treated every family with respect and dignity. The 4 sisters, now successful women in their 30s, met annually under the mango tree behind their mother's house. They talked about their achievements, their dreams, and occasionally about the father who had given them the greatest gift of all, the determination to prove him wrong. Sometimes the very thing we reject becomes our greatest regret. Emeka threw away 4 diamonds, calling them burdens. 30 years later, one of those burdens held his life in her hands as he stood before the bench of justice. This story teaches us that children are never burdens based on their gender. They are blessings waiting to unfold. And sometimes, the child you cast away today may become the judge of your tomorrow. What would you have done in Justice Chanasa's position? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, smash that like button, subscribe for more incredible African folktales, and share this with someone who needs to understand the true value of every child. Remember, what you call a curse today might become your only hope tomorrow.